All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're doing something really exciting. We are translating the dense, theoretical physics of systemic functional linguistics. We'll be zooming all the way from the macro level of clause complexes down to the micro level of group and phrase complexes. Think of it like adjusting the lens on an electron microscope, right? We're shifting our focus from observing these massive structural molecules down to the intricate atomic bonds that hold their individual components together. It's incredibly elegant.
So think about an everyday sentence like this. My brother and I were both very interested in snakes and birds. How do we map its structural physics without breaking it into completely separate messages? Now, in traditional schoolhouse grammar, we might just gloss over these as compound subjects and objects. But as language analysts, we demand a higher degree of precision. We want to understand the exact mathematical relationship happening here, and we want to do it without fundamentally altering the transitivity or the single experiential figure of the clause. And this brilliant comparison gets right to our first core concept. Instead of upgrading to two completely separate clauses, like we were interested in snakes and we were interested in birds, which, let's be honest, creates two separate entirely redundant figures, language does something much smarter. It elegantly zooms in. It combines parts of the clause at the group rank. This gives us a highly efficient single message, a single proposition, and a single experiential figure, all while packing in a ton of complex meaning. So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 6 key milestones: parataxis, hypotaxis, phase, conation, and modulation, the agency matrix, and finally, projection versus expansion.
Let's start right at the top with Section 1, parataxis, equal partners, where we're combining units of equal status. In parataxis, we essentially have equal partners. I want you to visualize this like equal-sized building blocks stacked perfectly side by side on a structural diagram. Because they share perfectly equal status, any single member of the complex could theoretically be pulled out to replace the whole shebang, and the grammatical function of the clause wouldn't change at all. It remains entirely intact. It's a horizontal relationship of true peers.
This brilliantly illustrates the three logical relations operating at this rank. First, we have elaborating, which acts as a restatement or apposition. Think of something like, Apple introduced the LaserWriter, the first PostScript laser printer. Next, we have extending, which acts as a straightforward addition, like Bruce and Philip were friends. And finally, enhancing, which gives us circumstantial context like time or cause. For example, a person who tried but failed.
Moving right along to Section 2, we have hypotaxis, dominant and dependent. This is all about unequal status in the phrase complex.
Now with hypotaxis, things get really interesting because we shift from a horizontal plane to a vertical, hierarchical one. We have nested nodes now. You can visualize these as overlapping concentric rings. We categorize these dependencies with Greek letters. The dominant alpha element carries the core weight. It's the boss. It can stand entirely alone. But the dependent beta and gamma elements absolutely cannot. They act as satellites, relying completely on that alpha node to anchor them into the structure of the clause.
To really grasp this, we need to view this system as a whole. Think of this multidimensional matrix from Halliday and Matheson as essentially the periodic table of complex phrasing in English. It shows exactly how the type of taxis, parataxis on one side, hypotaxis on the other, intersects with logico-semantic types across nominal, adverbial, and verbal groups. By locating a phrase on this grid, you can instantly predict its structural behavior. It's incredibly powerful.
But to truly master this matrix, we have to recognize its theoretical boundaries. Consider these two phrases. The house that Jack built features an embedded, defining clause that points to a specific item. It acts like an inseparable internal organ of the noun, versus my new hat with the feather in, which is a hypotactic, descriptive phrase that merely elaborates with a secondary note. Distinguishing between true embedding and hypotaxis is an absolute requirement for mapping textual architecture accurately.
Okay, let's jump into Section 3, phase, expanding reality. Here, we're exploring the physics of becoming in verbal groups.
Let's see how this builds specifically into the verbal group complex. Think of phase as the physics of becoming. It acts almost like a sliding scale that morphs a single process from merely apparent to fully realized, or from just starting to maintaining. We aren't dealing with two separate chronological events here, right? We're analyzing the internal evolution and staging of one single happening, mapped elegantly through the verbal group.
You can clearly see how time phase and reality phase track these exact stages of becoming. We move from the apparent, like when someone seems to know, to the fully realized, when they turn out to know. Or if we look at time phase, we go from the inceptive, when someone starts to win, to the durative, when they keep working. This utilizes both perfective irrealis aspects, using the word to, and imperfective realis aspects, which usually end in ing.
Next up is Section 4, Conation and Modulation. We'll be breaking down trying, succeeding, and circumstantial enhancement.
So, conation measures the potential and the actual within a systemic environment. It tracks an attempt to see if it actually succeeds, essentially forcing the subject to act as a behavior, no matter what the main action is.
Notice how these verbs chain together sequentially into one cohesive happening. The system moves step by step from the abstract potential ability to the physical attempt and finally to the conclusive success. From be able to open, to try to open, to succeed in opening. It's just a beautifully logical extension of the action through hypotaxis.
But what happens when we apply systemic stress, like, say, switching a phrase from active to passive voice? When we map these hypotactic complexes, it's vital to realize that only the secondary group, the one expressing the actual physical happening, embodies the voice feature. So the active formula, ants keep biting me, smoothly transforms into the passive formula, I keep getting bitten by ants. Notice how the primary verb keep remains completely untouched. The system absorbs the structural change purely at the secondary dependent node.
All right, rolling right into Section 5, the agency matrix, where we're introducing causatives. So what happens to the linguistic physics when we introduce a completely new external participant? Well, causatives act as external forces acting upon the linguistic system. They introduce a new agent, an initiator, by expanding the verbal group with specific enhancing verbs like make, force, or let. This gives the language the ability to express effective agency analytically, showing exactly how one participant acts upon another to trigger an event.
Watch how this beautifully builds a causal chain. We start with a simple middle event, the ball rolled. Then we inject a causative force. John made the ball roll. Finally, we expand it even further. Mary made John roll the ball. This maps exactly how agency can expand indefinitely within the matrix. It connects an overarching agent to a subordinate agent all the way down to the final medium that actually experiences the action. Mathematically speaking, it's incredibly satisfying.
And finally, we arrive at Section 6, Projection versus Expansion, dealing with separate realities and distinct timelines.
Now pay close attention here, because projection behaves completely differently from everything else we've mapped out so far. The crucial point is this. Unlike expansion, which describes a single physical happening unfolding in the real world, projection involves entirely separate realities. Why? Because the projected event is a metaphenomenon. It's just a meaning, an idea, or a mentalized proposal. It's not necessarily a concrete physical action that has actually occurred or ever will occur.
This text comparison elegantly proves that projection possesses very unique mathematical constraints. If you try to mix timelines with an expansion verbal group, it literally breaks the system. You cannot logically say, yesterday he started to do it tomorrow. I mean, it's completely absurd, right? But with projection, it works perfectly. Yesterday he wanted to do it tomorrow. This vividly demonstrates that the wanting and the doing operate on entirely distinct timelines and in completely distinct conceptual realities.
As we zoom out from these microscopic fractal layers of grammar and wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. How does mapping these invisible grammatical physics fundamentally change the way you analyze human communication? Because once you understand the architecture beneath the words, you unlock the true mechanics of meaning. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep exploring the systems all around you.